It's a judgment that the judges have reserved for themselves and want to make sure that the situation warrants a non-resuscitated order in someone's life. So all the decisions that the guardianship has to do are pretty strong. And if you have family members that might be in this situation, I would encourage you to look at some of the other alternatives because it's very important. And you know, we say, well, how does somebody get in that situation? Talk about living in your car from one paycheck to another, you could be in that situation. We have an individual whose family has a building at University of Miami named after them. And now she's a ward of the state in the public guardian program. So it's not that far-fetched that many of us could fall into that category. And also a warning that I have for all the case managers that we have is that in some cases, the Department of Children and Families Adult Protective Services was the primary one that will really investigate a situation. If you call the elder helpline and report something like your neighbor, you know, it looks like you haven't bathed in a while and her lawn is looking pretty shaggy, they'll go out and investigate, and if they feel that the person really is not seem to be with it, they will apply for a petition for guardianship with the court, and if they feel they don't have money, we will be appointed. But in some cases, you may have just endured a family situation, a death in the family, you might have lost your job, and it will cause you to change the way you behave and the way you act towards yourself and to others. And if someone doesn't know the whole picture and will come in and looks at you through that little peephole of how you are today, you know, I have sometimes where I don't take a shower in the morning and I look pretty bad. So yeah, I hate for the DCF to come in not knowing me and knowing what my situation is, take me before the court and you know, appoint a guardian. We had a situation last year where a woman from Newport Richey on the west coast of Florida cashed about $2,000 in her bank, got in her car with a cooler full of food, came to Miami. She got disoriented here. Went to ask the police for help, and they felt like she was not altogether there. They took her to Baptist Hospital. The attorney there petitioned for guardianship because the woman couldn't explain herself or her family or anything like that. So she was placed on a guardianship with us. I contacted the public guardian on the West Coast and went to her apartment. All the food was up to date in the refrigerator. She found connections to a church. She had a family in the church over there. The only family she had was scattered throughout the United States and they didn't want any involvement with her. So we petitioned the court to have her return to her environment in the West Coast. And after many, many months, we were successful in doing it. But here's a person who, through no fault of her own, really found herself in a situation where she couldn't be made to be understood of what she was doing here, how she could get back. And she ended up with us. She had money. She had a very late model car. And her apartment in Newport Richey had been paid for. It wasn't like it was behind her bill. So something happened in that individual's life that triggered this behavior. And it was something that could have been restorable, but instead the system worked the way it should have, but it came up with an outcome that really wasn't the most favorable for the person. So it's important that we as an agency don't get so complacent that we find everything is normal and that we've done everything right and everything is correct for the person. So I tell all our case managers we have to be vigilant, and in many cases it's our responsibility to, if the person has improved, to request a restoration. The state had some guidelines that you can only request a restoration every 6 months for them to look into it. Now you can request it 10 times a month if you feel the person warrants it. So the state does have some laws, and in fact the state of Florida is probably the most proactive state when it comes to guardianship laws. Last week, there were 4 people that testified before the U.S. Senate on guardianship issues and the protection of elders under guardianship. And our ex-state director of the guardianship program testified. And it's important because Florida has such a large senior population, and most of the people that come into a guardianship program, be it ours or be it private, are elderly individuals that have either their family has moved away and they have no one locally to care for them. So in the private side of it, guardianship can be fraught with abuse. It really can. Consider yourself, if you have money, you become incapacitated, you have control of your checkbook if you have a guardian appointed to you. The court has checks and balances, and there's an annual report that's required to go to an annual accounting. But if the judges and the clerks aren't looking at this very clearly, it is an opportunity to write blank checks. And it has happened. Even though Florida has one of the most aggressive guardianship laws, it can happen in Florida. So if you know of anyone that is involved in guardianship, and you can help in any way, not by becoming the guardian, but by helping them, overseeing what the guardian is doing as far as the bills that are being paid, because the guardian can put in that they're paying for new carpeting for their wards home because they need it. You go and check, there's no carpeting been done. So there's a lot of ways that individuals that are placed in the position of trust can abuse that trust and use it for their own devices. So I don't want to take up the time on everybody's early mornings. I'll open it up to questions. Ron?
How many new intakes do you have on a yearly basis?
On a yearly, we get average monthly about 20 new referrals. Not about 1 or 2 of those will not stay with us. We'll find in our investigation that they do have family or that they have money and then it goes to a private bank. But we have about 20 referrals a month. Yes, ma'am.
But it sounds like in a lot of cases, it seems like some families step back even though there is family. All of a sudden they don't want to partake. Do you have a lot of that where the families just don't want to be involved?
We do have a lot of that. We have some cases where the siblings are arguing. So the court will appoint us as the investigator to see which one should be. And if there's no resolution possible, then they'll appoint us. And then the other people will be very involved. But families tend to be not involved until the very end of life. And even though there might be just like $2,000 left from accrued savings, they'll step in and they want to be, know what's going on and do an accounting of the expenses. So it's only at the end when money is in the water that people
Jerry,
Yes,
is the guardianship program, is it a Dade, it's primarily a Dade County organization here, and then there are other county ones too, or?
This one is only Dade County. There are 15 public guardians in the state of Florida, which we're one. And we're the largest. We have more wards here than the rest of the state put together.
So if I wanted to look up online about the guardianship program, I'd look under Dade County or Miami-Dade County?
It's called guardianshipprogram.org.
You know, you might want to just refer yourself to the program.
We accept no self-referrals.
No self-referral.
Sir.
All the rights and stuff that you take from people is pretty radical. Who checks you to make sure you're doing the right things?
The courts do. The courts do. We're audited, well, first by an independent auditor yearly. We're audited by the state, by the county twice a year. We're audited by the state once every 2 years. We're audited by Social Security because we do get we collect a fee from Social Security when we're called what's called representative payee. So all those entities oversee it. Plus, we're required to file every April 1st. We have to file an annual counting, which means every dollar that came in, every dollar that came out of that person. And also have to do an annual plan, which means what is the prognosis for this person and what are we doing to care for that and plan for the future.
Is the 20 a month the number of people that need services, or is that the number of people a month that you can actually provide services for?
That's the number that actually gets referred to us. The studies that have been done in Florida say that we're only caring for about 1/3 of the people that actually.
It doesn't seem that many, that's all I was thinking. I mean, in this county, it just doesn't seem that big a number.
And if you look at it like in our neighboring county, Broward County, they have 180 wards in their jurisdiction, but we have 1,080. So they don't get the county funding that we do. They only get a little bit of state funding, and they operate their case management through Barry University. So they're very limited in funding. But you're right, there's a lot more out there. At least it's suspected that it's more out there. Anybody else? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.